My name is Frank Smith, and I'm the founding director of the African American Civil War Memorial and Museum here in Washington, D.C. And I'm happy to do this little interview about Dr. Martin Luther King. First of all, let me say I met Dr. King when I was a civil rights worker working with the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee in Atlanta, Georgia. I met him there while I was a student at Morehouse College, and then we would picket and go to jail a couple of times, and then fortunately I was able to have a last conversation with him like the day before he was killed in Memphis at an airport. But one of my fondest memories of him, one of my great memories of him was, I might say, well, I won't say it was so fun, but we were in Selma, Alabama at a meeting, a big mass meeting that was being held at two different churches, one across the street from the other. And at the time, these seemed to be and we were actually planning the Selma to Montgomery March. And he had to preach at both of these churches, and at some point, and actually the SNCC people were supposed to provide some kind of security for him. I was one of those SNCC staff people. And so we were sort of ringing the stage where he was speaking, and then some state highway patrolman came in there and said that they wanted to provide him some kind of security because they had heard that somebody was going to try to assassinate him that night. And so it was kind of weird to have a big, burly state highway patrolman sort of show up, two or three of them, and say they were providing security for somebody in the civil rights movement. Anyway, we tried to stay close between Dr. King and these guys as we sort of went through the crowd to get out of the door. And Dr. King was kind of short, about 5'8" or 5'9" or something like that, a little shorter than I was. So we got separated in the crowd. And last time I saw him, he was in the middle of the street, but he was giving this police officer, I don't know what happened, but I remember pointing and seeing his head bobbing like that, his finger was pointing, and I said, Dr. King is giving him hell, but I have to be honest with you, I didn't think he would survive the night. I mean, he put his life on the line so many times that I'm sure other people have lots of stories about him when they thought that anything could have happened. And fortunately, nothing did happen to him that night, but it was a frightening moment for me. And I remember thinking to myself that we were supposed to provide. We had no weapons or anything like that, so all we could do would be to stand between him and somebody who was trying to assassinate him. So, but it was a frightening moment, and this man had the courage of his conviction. If the world doesn't know that already, let me say it to the world. He had the courage of his conviction. He lived with the fear of death all the time. He was somebody who was at peace with his God and at peace with the people around him. And I think that's what made him so effective and such an inspirational leader. And although there were times when the SNCC had, we didn't agree with some of his tactics, and he certainly did not agree with our tactics many times because he thought we were young and brash and too confrontational, quite honestly. He thought that our style of nonviolence was too confrontational and it provoked people to do things as opposed to us being more passive in the Gandhi style of pacifism. But we did work together, so much so that the day I saw him, the day before he was assassinated, he stopped to ask me to come to Memphis to help him organize what he called the Young Panthers, the teenagers that were following his march. And he recognized that SNCC did have a way of organizing young people that were very, very much more successful than his organization did, primarily because we were younger and closer to the ages that the people that he was concerned about, the teenagers there in Memphis. Of course, they were not the ones that harmed him. At the end of the day, he was shot by a sniper who was hiding in the bushes in some cowardly act of a gunman who shot him from ambush. So it wasn't the teenagers that ended up harming him in the end. But he lived with the courage. He lived with the fear of death all the time of his life. I'm sure he did, probably even when he was home in the bed sleeping. But his leadership inspired the country. It inspired the nation. And I think it's a tribute to him and to his cause and his belief in America and in the American ideals. As a tribute to him and all of those things that he stood for, America is finally going to honor him in an appropriate manner by putting a statue for him up on the mall among the presidents. He'll be the only non-presidential statue on the mall, and it's a fitting and proper place for him to be. And let me just say to the world that I would suspect that the world knows more about Martin Luther King than they do about these other presidents that are out there on that wall. You can stop people in Berlin and in the Ukraine and in South Africa, and then they know who Martin Luther King is. They don't even know who the first president of the United States is, and certainly never knew who Abraham Lincoln was, although Lincoln was very important to us in the liberation of the black community here in America. But King may be the most known, the best known of all of those characters and will continue to be so. There are roads and streets and bridges named for Dr. Martin Luther King all over the world, and freedom movements all over the world saying "We shall overcome" as a tribute to him and to the civil rights movement here in the United States. So he was inspirational not only to us, but to people in the world outside of the United States, and will be an inspiration to freedom-loving people everywhere who have to fight for their freedom, who have to really sacrifice to try to get those God-given rights that Dr. King believed in and that we all believe in. So congratulations to Dr. King and his legacy. America is finally doing the right thing, and I'm glad to be able to live long enough to be a part of it.